I'm missing all the funny stuff.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
That's better.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Good morning, everyone.
We can hear you, Councillor Kavanaugh.
Oh, good. I'm missing all the jokes Ariel's telling.
Oh, we're talking about pride.
Oh,
Just giving everybody our tips on, bring a hat, bring sunscreen, bring water, when you've been doing it for 20 years.
yeah. Since 2006. OCH will be the best float. That's all there is to know.
Well, I think you're grouped together with all of us with public health too, so
Okay.
I'll just join the best party.
Testing 1, 2, testing 1, 2. Can anybody hear me? This is Sean.
Hear you.
But Crawford didn't sit stand. Crawford, get yourself. No. Emily, what's it? I can master. Emily, I can master the art.
Don, you better turn off my mic.
What's this? Give it. Bubble. Emily, do a bubble.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Transportation Committee. Meeting number 7. First of all, I want to acknowledge that we're located on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, whose culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We do have regrets from Councillor Luloff and Councillor Johnson. At this point, I'll get our committee coordinator to do roll call.
Councillor Bradley,
Here.
Councillor Giroux, Councillor Desroches,
Here.
Councillor Devine,
Here.
Councillor Judas, Councillor Gower,
Here.
Councillor Johnson, Councillor Lowe, Councillor Luloff, Councillor Troster,
Here.
Vice Chair Kitts,
Here.
and Chair Tierney.
Here.
Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you very much, committee coordinator. Confirmation of minutes, June 22nd, 2023. Are these carried? Thank you. Responses to inquiries, we have none on this one. First item, I'm going to go through the agenda clearing first. Item 5.1, Bank Street cycling and transit improvements, Riverside Drive westbound to Elmer Avenue. We do have quite a number of delegations today, 21 delegations. So I'll ask people in advance to please stick to the item that's on the report today. And I'll be pretty firm on that because we want to make sure we award time to all our delegations so they have an opportunity to speak. So we'll hold that. We do have a presentation. The second one is item 5.2. We do have a deferral motion from Vice Chair Kitts in regards to this, working with the ward councillor, Councillor Kavanagh. I'll get Councillor Kitts to read this into the record. Thank you.
Okay. Whereas the signing of the encroachment agreement for 2 Nesbitt Street is not considered highly urgent in nature, and whereas volunteer delegates have expressed concerns with their availability and ability to prepare for delegation, therefore be it resolved, the Transportation Committee defer the item listed as 4.2 to the October 26th, 2023 Transportation Committee meeting. Be it resolved that report titled Nesbitt Street Encroachment Agreement be deferred to the next Transportation Committee meeting scheduled for September 28th, 2023.
Great. Is this item carried? Thank you very much. So that will be deferred. There's no in-camera items. There's a motion. Councillor Lowe has withdrawn his motion in regards to Barrhaven East. That's correct. Thank you, Councillor Lowe. So we'll go back to the beginning of the agenda. We have our first item, which is the Bank Street cycling and transit improvements. So as per usual, we'll go to staff that do have a presentation. Then we'll go to delegations. Then we'll go to questions to staff.
Chair, before you continue, I just want to get clarification on the deferral because 2 dates were put in. I want to make sure that that wasn't an error.
Just give us one quick second, Councillor Kavanagh.
Okay, the deferral is for October.
Yes, my apologies. So therefore be it resolved, the Transportation Committee defer the item listed as 4.2 to the October 26th, 2023 Transportation Committee meeting.
Perfect. I'm glad we fixed that. Thank you so much. Continue. Thank you.
Is that accepted by committee? Yes, I see nods, so we're good on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So we're going to go back. We do have our staff in front of us here today, and they're going to give us a wonderful presentation. Please proceed.
I'll just do a quick introduction. My name is Deb Lightman, Program Manager of Active Transportation Planning, and Cal Hakala, Senior Project Manager, is the file lead. So he'll be telling us a bit about this project that has been long in the works and that we're happy to be bringing forward today.
Great. Thanks, Deb, and thanks, Chair and Committee, for having us. I think we can dive right in. So next slide, please. All right, so this project consists of 2 components. One is adding new cycling facilities on Bank Street across Billings Bridge. So that's between Riverside Drive westbound and just north of Riverdale Avenue, as well as a second component, which is a northbound bus lane that's during the afternoon peak only on Bank Street between Chesley and Elmer. So that's through Old Ottawa South. And this is all part of the Bank Street renewal project that is just beginning as well. Next slide, please. This project is being advanced because of some existing problems and issues that we've identified in the area. So we're trying to address those with this project. The first one is a known safety issue with cyclists at the intersection of Bank and Riverside Drive westbound. That's a high-risk intersection for cyclists. We have evidence of many cycling-related collisions at that intersection, particularly right hooks, which is the kind that you see in the top right photo. Bank Street is also a 4-lane road that's not very comfortable for people cycling. There are no cycling facilities there. As a result, many people cycle on the sidewalk, which is hazardous to people who are trying to walk on that sidewalk, and it's a very narrow sidewalk. We find about half of people cycling in the area ride on the sidewalk, which is very high. Next slide, please. It's also a problem with connectivity for people cycling. Rideau River is a major barrier for people cycling in this area, trying to get from Old Ottawa South to the commercial and transit way on the south side of the river, but vice versa as well to various destinations on either side. During the transportation master plan deliberations, we heard from people in the community that Billings Bridge is one of the key missing links in the area. So that's that image on the bottom left, showing all those pins of what the public was identifying. And we also know that there's lots of pathways in the area and other bike facilities that people are trying to get to as well. Next slide, please. From a transit point of view, there are also some issues, particularly in the afternoon peak. We found that the single northbound lane in the afternoon peak, because there's parking permitted in the afternoon, restricts traffic to a degree that it impacts transit delays and reliability. So this graph on the right side of the screen shows how long it takes a transit vehicle to get through Old Ottawa South during different times of the day. Most of the time it's around 3 to 4 minutes. During that afternoon peak period that we've shaded in pink, it jumps up to more like 6 or 7 minutes. So it's a substantial increase in delay during that period. The routes that use this corridor are high volume routes, route 6 and 7, a lot of demand on those routes, and we have high capacity buses already using those routes with more schedule adjustments slated for the fall. Next slide, please. So this study was initiated a few years ago in the end of 2020, stemming from issues trying to address the cycling safety issues at the intersection of Bank and Riverside Drive westbound related to that Bank Street renewal project that's ongoing. This project was also a #1 pick by both the ward councillors in the area. So that's Councillor Menard, Ward 17, as well as former Councillor Puche from Ward 18, back when the transportation master plan was being deliberated. And as I mentioned on a previous slide, it's one of the cycling safety high-risk intersections that's been identified through that project. From a transportation master plan point of view, this Billings Bridge was identified as a cycling feasibility study project, and Bank Street is a crosstown bikeway in this area, and Bank Street is also a transit priority corridor. Next slide, please. So here's the recommended plan of what we are proposing across Billings Bridge. So the left side of your screen is north towards downtown, right side of your screen is south towards South Keys. The Rideau River is right in the middle of the screen. And what you can see here is that there will be a bike lane added to both sides of Billings Bridge or Bank Street across Billings Bridge, as well as major modifications made to the intersections at Riverside and Riverdale. In addition to the bike lanes being added, because the width of the bridge is fixed, we are reducing one of the vehicular travel lanes from 4 to 3. So there will be 2 through lanes in each direction, or sorry, 1 through lane in each direction, plus an auxiliary lane as it approaches Riverside and Riverdale in each direction. That's important because in the southbound direction, we need a right turn lane there so we can operate that right turn on a separate signal phase from people cycling, because that is one of the key points that we found was problematic from a cycling safety point of view, that particular movement. So separating out that movement using signalization is the preferred way to deal with that. Next slide, please. So what are the impacts from this proposal? Well, from a cycling point of view, we get improved safety and comfort. We've added some improvements to the design at both Riverdale and Riverside to make them more comfortable for people cycling and have elements that improve safety as well, what we call protected intersections. We also added that signal phasing change at Riverside Drive to address that major conflict point that we had previously talked about. And just adding bike lanes across Billings Bridge bridges a major gap in the network and allows people to get to more destinations and connects to a key equity priority neighborhood to the south. From a pedestrian point of view, we're improving safety. We're making shorter pedestrian crossings at some of the crossings at intersections. We're adding shorter or tighter turning radii to make vehicles turn slower. We're adding pedestrian head start signals, so pedestrians get priority at intersections. And then also removing bikes from the sidewalk makes those sidewalks a bit safer and reduces that conflict. From a transit point of view, we're reducing delays and improving reliability, particularly in that northbound direction in the afternoon peak. So you can see the impact that that has on Route 6 is saving up to 1,200 customer minutes each day, but there's also Route 7 that uses part of that corridor as well. There will be some savings for that route as well. And there's some minor impacts to Route 5 in the morning. Next slide, please. So with some of those benefits and improvements, there are some impacts on other road users. In particular, from a traffic point of view, there will be some reduced capacity, especially during peak hours. So in order to map out what this looked like, we did do some traffic analysis to try to predict what that impact would be. When we did that, we used pre-pandemic traffic volumes, which are perhaps a little more conservative, but we also included nearby developments that we know are going in the area and future projections. As a result of all that, we expect that Riverside Drive westbound could see some increase in delay of up to around 2.5 minutes in the morning and 1 minute in the afternoon peak. There will also be some increased queues or traffic backups during peak hours on both Bank and Riverside. However, we find that some traffic will likely divert to other parallel routes that do have capacity, such as Main and Bronson. We did want to point out, though, that the current construction delays that people have probably been experiencing, if you've driven through that area in the last few weeks, there's been some construction going on. We don't believe that those delays will be reflective of what will happen if this project goes ahead, simply because the number of lanes will be different. We'll have dedicated right turn lanes. We'll have signaling that helps those turn lanes function properly, as well as through traffic move through. People will adjust their routes accordingly, and many other reasons why we think that this proposal will function very differently than what you're seeing there in the field today. From a parking point of view, there will be some loss of parking spaces to accommodate both the bike lanes and the transit lanes. Some of those are permanent, some will just be in that afternoon peak period. As you can see here, there is a bit of a trade-off between improvements for cycling and pedestrian safety, as well as transit reliability on one hand, and impacts to traffic and parking on the other hand. However, our transportation master plan policies support these changes. The transportation master plan speaks to repurposing peak road capacity for other users, such as pedestrians, transit, cycling, and trying to prioritize that multimodal mobility. Next slide, please. So we did have a public engagement period for this project in June. We got a lot of good response on a survey that had up on the Engage Ottawa site, and as well as many other responses via email. And overall, we found overwhelming support for the bike lanes and for the bus lane. We also held a public meeting as well, where we had a lot of good discussion there from a diverse group of participants. We engaged with the Accessibility Advisory Committee. And overall, with all those different groups that we consulted with, we heard many different concerns, but the major ones were the loss of parking for both businesses and people with disabilities, traffic congestion, as well as on the other side, a desire for more physical separation for the cycling facilities. Next slide, please. So this is a bit of a time-sensitive opportunity to coordinate with that Bank Street renewal project that's already started. This is an opportunity to make these changes as part of that project in 2024. So if this proposal does get approved by committee and council, we would be looking to advance that to detailed design in the fall and early next year for construction in 2024. Next slide. And that's the end of our presentation. Thank you, and we'll be happy to answer questions as the committee goes on.
Great. Thank you very much. So I'll get you guys to hang tight. We're going to go directly to our delegations. Our first delegate is Neil Saravamoto. There is some slides, so we'll get those pulled up for you. Neil, you're no stranger. You have 5 minutes, and we'll just wait for your presentation before you begin.
Great, here we go. Thanks very much, Chair. I'd like to make 3 points today. Hopefully I'll be fairly brief. And the first point is really about why I'm here. This summer we've had some very extreme weather we've never seen before. This is the new normal. The future is now. And it's not unrelated to what we're talking about today. Personally, if we're not taking action today, these trends are just going to continue and worsen. And so I'm here because I think all of us need to be doing everything we can to slow down what's happening with the change in our climate and support initiatives that can help us in that direction. So that's and in fact, if we look at the city of Ottawa, the #1 source of emissions is transportation. So in a sense, this committee is in many ways a climate change committee, as are some of the other committees here. Next slide, please. Second point I'd like to make is that this is a great proposal. I'd like to commend staff on what they've been able to put together. This is exactly what we need. I go through this intersection quite a lot. I was down earlier this week taking a few photographs, and interestingly, as I was standing at Bank and Riverside, a collision happened right in front of me, just as I was standing there, and it was a fender bender, and so it probably was never reported into police and doesn't show up in the statistics. But we're getting collisions, according to the city data, like about on average every 26 days at this intersection. So we really need to be doing something about that, obviously. And the great thing about bike lanes is that they make roads safer for everyone, not just cyclists, not just pedestrians, but also for drivers. Car collisions are reduced when bike lanes are introduced because they have a more controlled flow to traffic that makes it safer for everyone. Of course, the important thing about this proposal too is that it allows all ages and all abilities to bike through this intersection. This is a key pinch point that people on the south side of the city, just one of the key ways to get into town. And if that is not safe and available to all ages and all abilities, it just, people just won't cycle. And, the number is like half the population say that they are interested but concerned in cycling. So they're interested in cycling, but they're concerned that the infrastructure is just not safe enough. And so this is an ability where we can fix that. And then the final point is that about this proposal is that with our transit system, I mean, a lot of people feel that we've got a broken system right now. We need to do everything we can to fix it, and that includes prioritizing transit, which is exactly what this proposal talks about. On the negative side of the proposal, as staff have pointed out, is the loss of parking spots and some traffic delays. Now, I think parking seems to be the one that gets the most attention, and so 14 parking spots would be removed at the very close to the Billings Bridge. You know, when I was down there, I had a look, and there's I think about 5 businesses that would be directly affected there. I noticed that all 5 of those, I believe all 5 of those have their own off-site parking lots. Okay, the Dairy Queen, the kitchen store. So, you know, sure, we're going to lose some parking on the street, but there's plenty of parking for those businesses. Next slide, please. And so the third point I'd make is, like, do we really have a choice? Do we really have a choice? You know, if you look at Stats Canada data, we have about 170,000 cars commuting daily. Okay, now we're in a city that is expected to grow by 40% in the next 25 years. So that would, you know, business as usual, that would imply an additional 70,000 cars daily. So where on earth are we going to put 70,000 cars on our road network right now? Next slide, please. The next, other direction. Yeah, thanks. And so when we talk about congestion, I mean, we've essentially got 3 options. Number one, we can, you know, we've got 3 theoretical options. Number one, we can widen roads, but that, I think, you know, I've heard this committee talk many times about induced demand. More space just brings more cars out. Number 2, we can price roads, but that's politically challenging and also from a regulatory perspective, not an option currently. But number 3, we can make other modes of travel viable. And that's really what this project is all about. And so the question we need to ask is, how many cars could better infrastructure take off the road? Next slide, please. So I'd like to end my presentation there. And there's a number of reactions that you know that we've heard in the past. I'm not going to go over them, but they're listed there. And if those are topics that people would like to bring up and talk about, I'd be more than happy to discuss those. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Neil. You always get it right down to the second, so I appreciate that. Looking around the board, I don't see any questions. Thank you for your presentation today. Next, we have Carrie Hodgins. There's slides to be put up as well. Oh, there's Carrie. Yeah, I'll just take a quick second there.
Yeah, not a problem.
And there we go.
Okay.
You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Carrie Hodgins. I'm here representing the businesses in Old Ottawa South. We do not have a BAA, so I have stepped up to the plate to assist them in our endeavor. I just wanted to give you a bit of background. My husband opened our first business in Old Ottawa South in 1975. And so we are now over 45 years. We have 2 businesses there now. I'm very familiar with the community and what goes on in the community. Next slide, please, Rosa. Okay, so these are the parking services study memo facts. This was a memo that was put out by the parking services. So what they found was that a higher use of parking on the east side, which actually has 41 parking spots. What we're extremely concerned about is that there's going to be 0 parking on this commercial strip of Bank Street between 3:30 and 5:30. because there is no parking. There's already a restriction in place going southbound at that time. One can only realize that this is almost prime time for all businesses along that strip, and to not have parking would be devastating for us. If some of the numbers on here are incorrect. I was initially told that it was going to be from 2 until 6:30. Cal's slide just said it was going to be from 2:30 to 5:30, but the impact remains the same. If we even look at it being restricted at 2:30, we're still looking at half the existing supply disappearing during that time. What we have to take into consideration is that there is no municipal parking for us. When I was speaking with the project team, their comment was the community would absorb it. One can only imagine how the community is going to absorb this amount of parking, and I will speak to that on the next slide. It is going to be displaced into the residential neighborhoods, and there is also going to be an issue for accessibility. So both ageism and accessibility is a big issue here, as well as anyone who uses Uber or any of those pickup services at the time. There will be nowhere for them to stop to do the pickup, and there will be no access for delivery to any of the businesses along the strip. Could I have the next slide, please, Rosa? Okay, so this is a map of what we're looking at. I'm speaking predominantly from Cameron right up to Aylmer Avenue. What you will notice on the east side, so if we look at I can actually see the Aslot Education Center there on the east side, which is almost 1/3 of the way up. Those blocks on the east side of Bank Street are not normal grid blocks. They're 2 blocks long, and if we go higher from Glen to Sunnyside, we experience the same thing. And then Sunnyside to Aylmer is a 2-block as well. If we look over to the right-hand side of the map, you'll also see that that's not a normal grid system there. So the limited parking is pushed onto Willard Street. Willard Street already experiences high volume traffic and parking on their street. One of the interesting comments that was brought up when I was speaking to the project team about this was there was a comment saying, what, people don't want to have people parking in front of their house? That's not the issue. The issue is the constant traffic of cars searching for parking spots. I live on Wilton Crescent, which is right across from Lansdowne Park. And since Lansdowne has arrived, we're actually implementing traffic calming on our streets now because there's a reconstruction going under. And it's just the circling and circling of cars, and the 3-point turns that we experience are extremely unsafe for our children in that environment. I'm going to bring up at this point in time, because I do know that cycling is part of this project, that if you look at a block going north, you'll see that Grosvenor Avenue is there. The Ottawa South Community Association has been working with the city on putting a dedicated bike path or lane through there, which would be comparable kind of like Homewood O'Connor type path. And that would be to us and from their comments, a safer option as well, just to move the bikes off of Bank Street so they're not suffering from the buses and being doored by parking. Next slide, please, Rosa. Okay, so these are the transit facts by the numbers. So we assume that there's 4 buses per hour. They run 15 minutes or less. There's 5 bus stops between Riverdale and Aylmer. The ridership they determined at that point in time, the survey that was done in 2023 is...
Excuse me, Carrie, you've run out of time.
Okay.
So if you can quickly wrap up in 10 seconds,
Okay,
and
so
we do have
basically what we're
Councillor
looking at
Menard to
is,
ask you a question as well.
Okay, so we're looking at on average, a 2-minute savings of time that the buses would enjoy if we go from an average base, and we're only getting 28 people an hour from those. And we don't know that those 28 people are actually coming in. So what we're asking for is that the Old Ottawa South Community Association is asking for us to revisit this part of the thing. They've actually put a letter into the councillor. And the City of Parking Services memo actually asked for a more complete survey as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Menard?
Thank you so much, Sharon. Nice to see you, Carrie. I'm glad you're out. I just on your presentation, you focus very much on the Bank Street portion.
Yes.
Beyond the bridge. So I take
Yeah.
it the Billings Bridge changes are not as much of an issue. for
No,
you.
that wasn't part of the.
And I can appreciate that concern as well on the on this piece. I wonder if there's because I think the original proposal was 2:30 to 6:30.
Yes.
Staff have moved that to 2:30 to 5:30.
Yes.
And I guess just a question to yourself is if that was moved, I know you're concerned about the total parking in general in the area. If that was moved to a 2-hour time slot overall, we're in the highest peak periods for concern with buses. Is that something you would be in favor of? Or are you just concerned writ large, regardless if there's a 2-hour versus 3-hour versus 4-hour window?
The problem isn't the time. The problem is the zero parking during peak hours.
Okay, so that 3:30 to 5:30 period where there's the southbound peak period.
Yeah.
And then the northbound, I guess some congestion exists there with the buses. Okay, that's helpful for me to know. Certainly have my team looking at that piece and the overall timing. So thanks for being here and expressing your concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation today. Seeing no further questions, we do have a copy of her presentation that's on our drive. So members of the council can also see it before the council meeting.
Okay.
Thank you for
so
coming
much.
out today.
Okay.
Valerie McIntosh is our next delegate.
Hi, I'm Valerie McIntosh. I own a business in Old Ottawa South. I've lived in the neighborhood since 1964. You might call me an old girl. I've had the pleasure of owning a business for the last 31 years. I was at the corner of Sunnyside and Seneca for 11 years before, from 92 until 2002. I've been on Bank Street for the past 20, going on 21 years. We are a neighborhood business. But we are also a destination business, and our destination is the fact that we do bring in a lot of shoppers from all across Ottawa, across Hull, kind of Eastern Ontario. It's kind of a bit strange, but it's true. And our big thing is the parking. I can't imagine us not having parking. I just heard Sean mention something about maybe making it from 2:30 to 5:30, which I think would be much more reasonable, but we do need some parking. If we don't have parking on one side of the street, the only thing that's going to do is to drive in all of those people to our neighborhoods. We have a school at the corner, Hopewell Public School, which I attended, and it has no parking on the first half of that street from 3 till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Those people are going to have to find a place to park. I know everyone has recently suffered through the experience of the Queen Elizabeth driveway being closed down, and all it did was drive the traffic into the neighborhood. And if there's no parking available, that's what this is going to do. It's going to drive the people into the neighborhood. I can tell you exactly how I would do it because I've lived there for so long. I know exactly how I would avoid that bus bike lane. There's a turn signal at the corner of Sunnyside and Bank Street, which is an intersection that's a mess. Might even be a bigger mess than the corner of Riverside and Bank Street. But there's a left-hand turn signal. All you need is 3 or 4 cars there who are turning left, and you're going to back that traffic up all the way past the bridge. I personally like the bike lanes on the Lansdowne Bridge. I think they make a lot of sense. I'm hoping for the bike lanes on the Billings Bridge aspect of it. I think it's going to be much safer. It's going to get the bikers off of the sidewalk, which is dangerous because I can't tell you how many times I walk out of my store and get clipped off by a biker. My husband and I did a small tour yesterday of other bike lanes. We went down to Rideau Street. It is from 3:30 to 5:30. I don't know why it was ever proposed that Bank Street in Old Ottawa South be from 2 until 6:30. That was just crazy to me. We also crossed the bridge and we went over into Vanier. It does have a separate bike lane. We saw 3 people on the bike lane for the time that we were driving. The bus bike lane there is also only 3:30 to 5:30. So I don't know where these extended hours are, but I think it does have to be taken into account that we do need parking. Bank of Nova Scotia across the street has recently undergone modification. If anybody parks in there, you're looking at a ticket or possibly even getting towed. as Carrie mentioned, we have no municipal parking in Old Ottawa South. Was my other point was, I don't even think that this has come from the community. I think that this was initiated from the councillor's office. As Carrie mentioned, Old Ottawa South Community Association, the Transportation Committee wrote a letter, great, well thought out letter, which is included somewhere, and they don't support it. And they speak for the community. And if they don't support it, then why should everyone else support it? It doesn't make sense. It hasn't been well thought out. I agree. If you want to do a bike lane from Aylmer down to Chesley or in front of Parody, that's fine, 3:30 to 5:30. But what's your problem? Like, I don't get having the bike lane on the other side of the street going northbound from that time. I took the bus home a week ago from Hopewell and Bank to my place at Mooney's Bay. It took me 18 minutes, which is amazing. Why? I don't get the extended need. And during the presentation, I didn't notice or hear anything that said how many bikers were going to be using that part of the street for the bus bike lane. I would think that there would have to be some numbers involved. I don't think this has been well thought out. I don't think the community's been consulted, and I sure as heck know that the businesses haven't been consulted and all that. Hope I'm under the 5 minutes.
You had 4 seconds remaining, so you
Excellent.
did quite well, but don't leave us yet. Councillor Menard, do you have a question?
Thanks so much, Chair. And yeah, just briefly, thanks, Valerie, for being here. On the proposal, so certainly Councillor Cloutier and I had spoken about the safety issues on Billings Bridge, not just for people that are walking and biking and taking transit, but also people that drive. We have, that is one of the top collision areas in all of the city, the Bank and Riverside intersections. And so very dangerous. We've lost lives there, of course, as you know.
Absolutely.
The bus lane proposal was one that came from staff and OC Transport, recognizing the concern with the congestion that happened through Bank Street. It wasn't our proposal directly, but I do see some merit in having some hours dedicated to that. So I think for us, like for our office, the big question for us is in terms of how those hours work in that northbound portion during that peak period. We're interested in the hours that you want to see. So I've heard from some other businesses that the 2:30 to 5:30 period would be difficult, or the 4 hours would be difficult. That's going to move down to 3 under the staff proposal. We're thinking about whether or not we do this for 2 hours or not, and what those 2 hours might be to start with. And so I'm trying to get feedback on that specific piece, because I think you mentioned even if it's 2 hours like it is at Rideau, that might be more amenable. So is your concern the same as the previous presenter, that having no parking on the street between 3:30 and 5:30 is the bigger concern with those hours, or is it the total time, I suppose?
I don't have a problem with the 3:30 to 5:30 because it's that way right now. You've already trained people,
right? That
it's there. Now you just need to train them that maybe they just have to use the inside lane instead of the outside lane. But what's going to happen with the intersection of Sunnyside and Bank Street? Until that intersection is dealt with, you can make all the changes in the world. It's not going to affect the traffic.
Yeah, that's a difficult one when you're coming on Sunnyside and the people that want to turn northbound from Sunnyside, that gets backed up there quite a bit.
Absolutely.
So no, I appreciate that concern as well. And I know it's something we take up with staff. But thanks so much for being here and your delegation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your delegation, and what really professional how you just got right into it right away and got it right down to the second. So
sorry, I didn't hear the first part.
It was a good delegation, so thank you for coming out.
Excellent, thank you.
Next up, we have Valerie McIntosh. Oh, forgive me. Next on my list, Betty McGregor.
Good morning. You can hear me fine?
Absolutely. Please proceed.
Chair and committee, thank you for allowing us to speak. I'm actually here from the Traffic and Safety Committee of the Old Ottawa South Community Association. We have, first of all, we're delighted to see that there is some activity and attention being taken for Bank Street. It's been a neglected area for a long time, a highly congested area with lots of pedestrians, lots of cyclists and lots of cars. Just following up on some of the earlier comments, we feel that at Bank Street, our main street is very vital to us as a community. I think many of us have moved there because we enjoy being in a downtown environment where we can reach businesses easily. So having said that, it's an awkward one. We hear what people are saying about the parking and how it will influence business. We're really here to say that we're very supportive and appreciative of the work that the city staff have done at looking at the issues, particularly on the Billings Bridge and how that has impacted the safety of both cyclists and pedestrians. And yes, indeed, there's a conflict on the bridge with people trying to walk across it or bike across it. So I'll just try to read some of my notes here so that I don't forget what I'm saying, because I don't do this thing on a regular basis. We want to see improved cycling, improved safety rather for both cyclists and pedestrians. But we know, I think, as Neil said earlier, that when streets are improved for cyclists and pedestrians, it's improved for everybody. We feel, though, with the proposal that's been put through, there are three key elements that we would like to see included in the design of the bridge. There really is a need for a physical separation from the bikes and the cars. We know that there's a tight space on the bridge, and we appreciate that it's been looked at all to look at getting people across the bridge safely. But if we don't have some kind of a separation, it will not be a safe place for cyclists in particular. We really like the design, though, at the corner of Riverside for people to turn right onto Riverside Drive. That will definitely make a difference. And the improvement at Riverdale, where there tends to be a lot of sliding through the lights of cars, and that'll make it safer for everyone. Another piece that's really important is looking at some kind of an enhanced connection between the eastern and the western parkway as cyclists, but also pedestrians are coming up to get onto that parkway as easily as possible. And the other piece that was suggested by staff, and we really support this, is to reduce the speed on that bridge from 50 kilometers an hour to 40. With respect to the bike lane, we feel that if this were to take place, there would need to be very vigilant monitoring of how whether cars use that lane. There's a tendency for people not to necessarily obey the traffic signs, and if this bike lane, should it actually happen, it will not be safe for cyclists unless it's very clear that cars cannot be in that lane for whatever period of time might be that might exist. And I think, as you were mentioning earlier, the city has suggested a feasibility study of cycling facilities on Bank Street, and we would very much like to see that happening as soon as possible in the next 12 months before other activity happens in that area, and how, again, our area of Bank Street will link up with South Ottawa rather, and the Glebe, because there is activity happening, I think, in both of those areas. So having said that, I guess basically our bottom line is we're very much in support of having bike lanes on the bridge. We think that'll bring safety, and I think that's all I have to say.
That's terrific. Thank you very much. Thanks for your delegation today. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the next delegation, Brian Montgomery, and I believe Brian is online. Hi, Brian. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it. I'm going to read my statement. And I'm probably not going to go the full 5. So my name is Brian Montgomery. I'm owner of the Oakachur Oatmeal Cafe, the corner of Bank and Glen. Excuse me. I'm not actually, I didn't join Carrie's group, not really for any other reason that I was away for a large part of the summer, missed a lot of the emails. I'm also taking a slightly different view than Carrie has presented with her group. I would like to say also that I feel that lumping these two issues together isn't that helpful. I think it's a little bit reminiscent of the U.S. congressional legislation process where, your riders are attached to every bill as it works its way through. We should not have to wish for one thing, but hold our nose in doing so. Because to get to that one thing, we have to accept the other thing. It makes us choose, and if we cannot choose, then it makes us not want to participate. And I did actually have that sort of decision about where the birds his met, and I'm fully in agreement with the bike lanes. And obviously, because I'm a business owner, the bus lane is more problematic. So with that, I'm going to move on. As we explore ways to improve transportation efficiency and promote sustainable urban mobility, I believe it's crucial to consider alternative street parking options that can cater the evolving needs of our community while maintaining a balance between various modes of transportation. While the introduction of a bus lane promises to alleviate congestion and encourage public transportation usage, it's important to recognize the value of on-street parking for residents, local businesses, and the overall urban landscape. In light of this, I'd like to propose a comprehensive approach that retains the convenience of parking while accommodating the pressing need for improved public transit, which I think we can all get behind. Multifunctional parking. To compensate for the potential loss of on-street parking spaces, the city should be considering investing and encouraging well-designed multifunctional parking options strategically located throughout Old Ottawa South, or really any neighborhood. We have options here. I'm going to spitball one here, but wouldn't it be great if the Bank of Nova Scotia at 1145 Bank was encouraged to give up part of their massive parking lot to allow for EV charging stations, bike parking, food delivery parking, scooter parking? They'd be doing a great thing for the community in this largely unused parking lot. The bank branch is only open from 10 to 5 as it is. A parking lot like this can provide a seamless transition between different transportation modes and can further promote eco-friendly practices. Obviously, it's just one idea, not even a very particularly well thought out one, but let's face it, let's start with spitballing more ideas and we can go from there. Changing the parking options in side streets and not make them so restricted. That's point number 2. Any one-way street in Old Ottawa South could have parking on both sides of the street. Glen Avenue is actually quite a broad street, and it could have angle parking, which would allow for more parking to compensate for the loss of spots on Bank Street. But I think that that's something that could be looked at rather than just the loss of parking on Bank. Now, I'm a little bit biased because I'm on a corner, and so I do get that benefit of people parking on Glen and walking up to the corner. I do recognize that. Resident-centric approach. Recognizing the needs of residents, we should prioritize the allocation of a certain percentage of parking spaces for local permit holders. That includes businesses that have owners that come into the neighborhood, have to park all day, or staff that have to park all day, which is a huge problem. This can ensure that those live in the neighborhood have reliable access to parking without compromising the larger goal of promoting public transportation. Let's make Old Ottawa South a better place for commerce, is my 4th point. Listen, this section of Bank Street is unfortunately, for us businesses, a place for people from someplace else to drive through to get somewhere else. If the businesses and residents want to change the dial in this, and we all should, then we need to help this strip become more pedestrian and cycling friendly. We should be actively encouraging cycling and walking by creating, yes, designated lanes and pedestrian friendly areas. Not only it contributes to a healthier community, but also reduces the overall demand for parking spaces. I'm going to be discussing this with Sean in the coming weeks, hopefully, and I would encourage any of my fellow business owners to join me. Now, speaking for my own business, our current hours of business in the afternoon run until 5 o'clock. We are open 10 hours a day. We currently lose 15% of hours to Front Street parking hours per day to the rush hour parking ban on the west side. We're going to go to 45% of the business day with some loss of our parking. What I'm asking for is really just an accommodation to allow our customers continued access to our business. But I'm also a realist. I think if we can get creative about it, we might not miss these spots. And if we don't get creative about it, we're always going to be in this situation where we're pitting businesses against the forces promoting transit. And
Sorry,
the backdrop of that.
Brian, your time has run out, but you do have a question from Councillor Menard.
Yeah, and sorry, Chair.
Let me just do my conclusions. 2 seconds. Okay.
Brian, I'll let you.
Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you, and I'm looking forward to working with you on these ideas you've presented here, because I know there's a lot to work on the side streets as well as other active modes of transportation that can benefit businesses too. So sorry, Chair, not so much a question. Just want to say thanks, and I know we're meeting I think in the next couple of weeks, so let's get down to business on that.
Okay, happy to do that.
Thank you very much for your delegation today, Brian. Seeing no questions, we're moving on to another Brian, Brian Tansey, as a delegation, and I believe Brian is on. There you are, Brian. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Okay, thanks very much. Can I be heard?
You're good to go, sir.
Okay, thanks. Yes, so very interesting what Brian Montgomery just said, and I like the idea of the broadening the scope of looking at solutions that are a little bit more complex, even that's what already been proposed. So I'm very heartened to hear Brian's presentation and the attitude about trying to find other ways to make this all happen properly. So, but my main point is that it's kind of like the essential amino acids. Apparently, in human life, we have 9 essential amino acids. Well, one of the key amino acids, if you want to, one of the key elements of city living is you have places where things don't connect, and that's what this project does not for car drivers who are actually quite safe in their vehicles. It's all those other people who are not safe when they're walking or cycling. And I do all those things. I live in the heart of this very district we're talking about. I live on Willard. So getting back to Brian Montgomery's point, I don't know why we have 3-hour parking, for example, on Willard. So it's very frequent that people come who actually are probably employees on Bank Street and park all day, and they just come around and shift their cars. You know, it's the old trick. I don't know why we allow 3-hour parking. So I would be very happy to participate with Brian Montgomery, but I'd be a citizen, he's a business, to participate in figuring out how we could make this all work together. Because the truth is, the civil infrastructure limits us. I mean, Bank Street's not going to get widened. They've already done a fantastic job on Bank Street Bridge. Really, really good job. What an improvement that Bank Street with reduction to 3 lanes. So I often will cycle up over there and cross under and go along on the Queen Elizabeth or whatever. But I use all modes of transport, and I have my Presto Pass. So I'm going north and south. And I have to admit that Bank Street really is, the Billings Bridge really is pretty dangerous. And I'm one of those offenders who sometimes walks and sometimes drives my bike on the sidewalk. So that improvement is great. So I guess what it gets down to is, it sounds like everybody's pretty well in agreement that we got to change the bridge, but there isn't a lot of agreement on whether we need to change the parking. And I'd say that it's a pinch point. So it's like one of those amino acids. It's just an example for the city of Ottawa, which we want to make at least the inner city living more livable. And that really means not cars, but public transit and active transportation. And in case you're wondering, I mean, maybe it shows, but I'm 81. I'm an active transportation person. I love to go places by walking, whether it's up to Lansdowne or beyond, up through the Glebe or even to Billings Bridge, but rarely Billings Bridge now because it is so dangerous. And my friend Meg was killed there 10 years ago, as we all know. And in a way, it's like she's become a martyr to the need to make this big change. So I would really support 2 things. One is all the changes actually that Mr. Hakala the staff has recommended, all of them, and for the reasons that they've said. And it would include that, though, that the citizens, people like myself who live in the area, would be quite happy to probably participate if we can be useful to the group that Brian Montgomery is talking about, proposing looking at other more complex but more reasonable exchanges, trade-offs, so that we can, all of us, have everything. Let's be greedy. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your delegation today. Seeing no questions, thanks for coming out, and we'll move along to Michael Hoolage. I'm probably butchering the name. I do apologize. Hi, Michael.
Hi, how you doing? It's Hollage. It rhymes with college.
Thank you very much for that. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thanks, appreciate that. I'm sure you can tell by the state of the doors behind me. I also live in the neighborhood. I live in Old Ottawa South. I've been here for about a couple of years. I don't have as much experience as some of the other delegates here, but I am in favor of the plan, similar to what Brian said just a moment ago. With the increase of residential development in Old Ottawa South, like recently with the library, what's proposed at the Quickie, and the potential redevelopment of the Hillary site, these projects will increase the housing supply in the neighborhood, and this increase should be accompanied by investments in mass transit to avoid the single vehicle congestion that shows up in the neighborhood. There's also there's a lack of LRT access in the neighborhood. At this point, I'm not aware of any plans to bring any extension of the LRT down underneath Bank Street, which is a problem because current Lansdowne status and what's being proposed there, and what's also being proposed at Billings Bridge with those two new buildings, will greatly increase the amount of traffic and congestion in the neighborhood. And I understand that parking is important for a lot of the businesses here, but I think this is an opportunity, particularly with the bus and bike lanes down the street. I think this is a great opportunity to make mass transit more reliable, more appealing to riders. I think the stores in the neighborhood, while they may see a decrease in car-based traffic, they may see an increase in foot traffic caused by this diversion of traffic, and it is only proposed for a couple of hours. That's pretty much all I had to say. I'm in favor of this. I support it. I think the bike lanes down on Billings Bridge also are an excellent idea. And that is a place that I often tend to avoid, particularly because of the diciness of that drive. I would even love to see this plan expanded further along Bank Street, the bus and bike lanes. That's all my time.
Thank you very much, Michael Hollage. That rhymes with college. Thanks for your delegation today. Seeing no questions. Thank you for coming out. We'll move on to our next delegation, Patrick Flagel.
Morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Flegel. I am a longtime resident of the Alta Vista neighborhood. So I'm south of the river on the other side of that pretty dangerous bridge. I've lived here for about 10 years now. I consider myself a recreational cyclist, but I've biked as a method of transportation to Carleton as well as to work along Bank Street on a regular basis over the last few years. Just to begin, I'd like to voice my support for everything on the proposal, both the bike lanes as well as the priority bus route. I think I'd just like to draw some attention to how important this small stretch of roadway is. It would connect multiple of the major cycling facilities that are in the neighborhood. Most obviously the Rideau Canal and Rideau River multi-use pathways. They're both very extensive and very well-used bike paths that don't currently have a connection into Old Ottawa South as well as Alta Vista. They connect to many of the great things like the downtown core, the glebe, and in addition, Old Ottawa South. If there's a connection in from them via bike lanes or buses, I think could bring a lot more bike traffic into many of the businesses and wonderful amenities there. In addition, and this is kind of what I'm hoping to see as well. There's the upcoming cycling facilities south of Riverside that cover the Alta Vista area as well as the connection to Heron. Currently, if there's no bike facilities between the Rideau Canal and the Rideau River, there's going to be kind of just a disconnect where we have the bike facilities in Lansdowne and the bike facilities in Alta Vista, and no real way to get between them without impeding traffic or getting caught up in dangerous altercations with with cars. So I'd just like to point out that this really is a very important area for bike lanes. Realistically, in my personal opinion, it's the only realistic area for a north-south bike corridor. The other option is Bronson, which, as we all know, is well, a little more dangerous. It's basically a highway with many intersections and many on-ramps, off-ramps. But I think that the bank is much more ideal for this. There are many large population densities along its length. Two very large apartment complexes going in at Lansdowne as well as Billing Bridge, which are on either side of this proposed bike lane connection, which I think are very necessary for the large amount of people that are going to be going in there. I'd just like to wrap up my statement here with a couple of anecdotes. Firstly, I think anyone who's driven, walked, biked, whatever down Bank Street at this part would agree that it's realistically just one lane in either direction because of all the street parking. I think any amount of traffic concerns or traffic impact for going down to 3 lanes is kind of baseless because we're going to be getting more lanes anyways if we're removing some of the street parking. I think that this will improve traffic flow along the length of Bank Street here, especially during peak hours with the bus. It's just a little cherry on top. Most of the congestion I've seen is due to bus congestion or interactions between bicyclists and cars. Having a separate bike lane removes the bike issue. Having a priority bus lane means that they can get through quicker and drop off more people to this neighborhood. I guess that's it. Or actually, a quick other anecdote. Since there was a bunch of stuff on parking, I quickly went through and just counted the parking spaces along Bank Street between here just from Google Maps. There are about 410 parking spaces available, or looks to be for businesses. So removing 14 is about 3%. 41 during peak hours is about 10%. But realistically, none of those lots are ever full. I think just having a few of the businesses come and talk together and share the parking lots that are already available would be a huge improvement. Thank you for letting me speak. And again, I'd just like to voice my support for both the cycling and the transit improvements.
Thank you very much for your delegation, Patrick. Please don't leave us quite yet. Councillor Carr has a question for you.
Hi, thanks very much. It's not so much a question, Councillor Tierney. I just wanted to thank Patrick for coming out. Both Cal and Councillor Menard noted in the presentation that this was initiated under the previous Alta Vista Councillor, previous Councillor Cloutier, and his office, Michael Reid, did a lot of work on this. And I just wanted to say that I really appreciate Patrick's delegation pointing out the challenges. We have had a lot of challenges in Alta Vista in terms of safe cycling, both from Bank Street and Smythe, and what connects to Main Street has always been challenging. And I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to come here today on behalf of Alta Vista. Thank you.
Great. And thank you very much for that, Councillor. Moving on to our next delegate, it's Mark Freed. I'll just give a second to get Mark online.
How about now?
Perfect. We can hear you loud and clear. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Good. Thank you very much, Councillor, and thank you to all of you for the opportunity to share my views. First of all, I want to say that I'm thrilled the city is doing something to improve safety on the bridge. I live in Old Ottawa South, and I use my bicycle for my regular transport, for shopping, etc. And I frequently cycle across the bridge to get to the Billings Bridge Mall. And I always feel like I'm taking my life in my hands when I do so. I've written to my councillor several times over the past 10 years in this regard, and the city always seemed somewhat indifferent to the dangers there, even after a cyclist was killed. So I'm very pleased to see progress. This proposal contains three great ideas that I fully support. One is the bike box ahead of traffic, so that way the cyclist can be seen by the drivers coming behind. The second is the signaling, an advanced bike signal and the right turn arrow. And third, reducing the traffic lanes from 4 to 3. And all of these should go a long way to improving safety at that corner, which is so dangerous. I would add that there are two aspects that are not so great, and I hope can be improved. First, as has been mentioned by other presenters, is the lack of a physical barrier to protect the cyclists. As a problem similar to the bridge over the canal before it was redesigned. Drivers see a wider road ahead of them when they approach the bridge and hit the accelerator. If a physical barrier is not possible, as the staff has presented, I suggest some steps be taken to slow drivers down and make them aware that cyclists are using the lane. Perhaps narrow the run up to the bridge south of Riverdale, or perhaps a speed bump or more visible signage, like a sign hanging over the road. That's the first aspect that could be improved. The second aspect is that the proposal does not address the other very dangerous situations for cyclists in that area, which are the 2 blocks between the bridge and the Billings Bridge Mall. I ride on the sidewalk because it is very dangerous crossing there. I very worry about crossing the eastbound Riverside Drive. There's a light, but the drivers making their right turn onto Bank Street South don't always pay attention don't get a light and don't pay attention to cyclist crossing. I hope the city will address this sooner rather than later, this section, rather than waiting for the new buildings to be built and the full bike lane to come in. How about some better signage now to make it clear to drivers that bikes use this section and to improve our own sense of security biking down there. I thank you again for the opportunity. And with these two suggestions for improvements, I'm thrilled to support the proposal.
Thank you very much, Mark, for coming out today. Oh, I see Councillor Carr has a question.
Hi, thanks, Mark. I just had a clarification. You're speaking about the needed improvements as you're moving south across Billings Bridge on Bank Street?
Yes, this is, well, it would be south and north, the section between the bridge and the mall.
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe that that will be looked after by the Bank Street redesign project. It started this year at Bank and Riverside, and we'll see the redevelopment of segregated bike lanes on that. The major construction will start next year. I believe I'm correct on that. If I could just get staff to nod. I see Deborah Lightman nodding. So that is being looked after as well. And I think you're in Councillor Menard's ward, but one of us could certainly send you the design for that project as well.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I do understand that. I'm asking for some immediate measure, which could be repainting the green on the side of the road, or painting it, or putting in additional signage so that it's not so dangerous right now, rather than waiting for the new buildings to be built and the new bike lanes to come in, which will take several years.
Okay, great. Thanks. We'll take that back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark, for coming out today. Seeing no further questions, we'll move on to the next delegate. It's Linda Matthews, and I believe there's some photos and videos.
I'm Linda Matthews, and I'm also here to applaud the initiatives that are underway. And I'm just going to start with, I do also live in Alta Vista. I commute by bike. Billings Bridge is one of the main Rideau River crossings that I use. I cross it most days. As a musician, I carry my gig gear by bike buggy, making the safer sidewalk route virtually impossible due to the limited space of my wide load. And I have a video that I took just yesterday. What it's like to arrive at that corner on Billings Bridge, where you decide whether you want to go on the sidewalk or go on the road. I'm faced with navigating the gauntlet. There have been many occasions where a large truck or SUV squeezes me to a halt. The raised wall on either side is a dangerous feature, as there's no way to jump onto the sidewalk in a pinch, making Billings Bridge far more dangerous than the Bank Street Bridge was before the bike lane improvements. And then while I was there, I took a couple of pictures just to demonstrate how many people choose the option of sidewalk if they can. The next couple of slides choose to ignore the signs and ride the sidewalk, putting up with the disgruntled pedestrians. I would never send a small child or elderly mother over this bridge via the roadway. It's just dumb luck that in these 10 years since the cement truck took a life, there hasn't been another ghost bike. There will be many more customers at the Ottawa South for the Ottawa South businesses if bike infrastructure was safer. Many examples of businesses turning around on their parking stance once bike lanes had been put in place, from Saint Denis in Montreal to the BIAs of Vancouver. There you can see from young and old, people are choosing the very small option, but safer option of going on the sidewalk. The proposed improvements, although much better than the status quo, are Band-Aid solutions. We need to dream bigger and build better, especially considering the 4 towers that are slated for the corners of Riverside and Bank. Billings Bridge is a major corridor and will only become more intensive. I'm thrilled that we're getting this Band-Aid solution, but eventually we'll need to come to design something safer, like a segregated portion of the active transportation, as others were suggesting, or even consider a separate footbridge, as seen here in Providence, Rhode Island. So that's the very last slide. Providence, where you can, it's kind of small, but you can see that instead of cantilevered, they have their own separate footbridge for bikers and pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great delegation presentation today. Thank you for coming out. Seeing no questions. Oh, sorry, I didn't say. I'll get you to come back, please.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I will be brief because I know we have a lot of delegations today. An essential dilemma that I try to solve in my own ward and is there's often a challenge, and my own mother has accessibility problems, and when we were in Montreal and near a lot of pedestrianized spaces or spaces with bike lanes, it can sometimes be a bit of a collision between accessibility concerns or concerns for seniors and the addition of bike lanes. And I know that Parkways for People are involved with advocating for pedestrianization. And I'm just interested in hearing your perspective on how we might tackle that challenge.
Well, that last slide, I know it's a dream down the way, but that would solve the accessibility problems. And I also have a mother who needs the wider space for safety. And that is what eventually I think our city should be looking at, how to be more equitable for the vulnerability population.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you again for coming out. Rob Semilak, I see you on the screen. You're no stranger. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours, sir.
Good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Again, my name is Rob Semilak. Today, I will be speaking in favor of adding protected bike lanes to Billings Bridge for 3 reasons. 1, safety. 2, improving traffic, congestion, and travel times. And 3, addressing the climate emergency. I live in Alta Vista, Ward 18. I'm a registered nurse, and I provide community care primarily in Alta Vista, Capital, and Somerset West wards. That care involves going into people's homes to provide palliative, wound, and infusion care. The fastest way around these wards is by bike, and it has the least amount of parking expenses. Before I went into nursing, I also trained as an engineer. I often bike with my 2 young children around the city as well. I take Billings Bridge multiple times a week, if not several times a day, often going from the Kilbourne area all the way down to Lord Lansdowne in that area. Meg Dussault she died biking on this bridge on her way home from work. Back then, I emailed Councillor Shinashenko and then others, and I've brought it up several times since, and I'm really happy that this proposal is being made. When biking on the roadway, there's nowhere to escape a 2-ton or larger vehicle from when it starts to drive dangerously. This is due to the steel support beams at the side of the roadway. When I'm with my kids, we always take the sidewalk. Drivers are never asked to get out and walk for 3 minutes of their commute, yet in this case, people on bikes are, or risk their life going on biking with the cars. Some will say that reducing the number of traffic lanes will increase traffic, congestion, travel times, and even air pollution. It may seem counterintuitive, but this is often a fallacy. If you look at Main Street, it was nearly identical to Bank Street 10 years ago, but now it flows better. And that's because the traffic lanes have been reduced and the design has been optimized. It flows. Bank Street does not flow very well. From Billings to Wellington, it's a maze of on-street parking and cars backed up to turn. Cars weave aggressively. I met a man last week who was doored by a parked car on Bank at McLaren, and he had to go to hospital with a concussion. Bank Street bottlenecks everywhere, and it needs to be redesigned. This project is very good as it moves in that direction. People need to be brought into the downtown core by other means other than cars. There simply isn't enough space for cars as the city grows. Cities like London, Paris, Amsterdam, Oslo, New York have learned this. Ottawa, on paper, accepts this, but in reality, we have to accept it as well. Billings Bridge, it's a critical link to biking into the downtown core, as well as to cross the city. Rivers and highway crossings are the primary obstacles in the city for connecting active transportation infrastructure. Finally, we're in a climate emergency, and that's caused by us burning fossil fuels. We need to burn less fossil fuels. And the best way for a city to do that is to build really good quality active transportation and public transportation infrastructure. There's many homeowners in Alta Vista that were devastated by flooding on August 10th. I had 6 days without power due to the derecho. Others in Ottawa have been hit by tornadoes. This is getting worse. I never had storms this bad or frequent when I was growing up in this city. Thankfully, as well, back in June, there was there was a month where we couldn't safely go outside to breathe because of the wildfire smoke. And wildfire smoke causes increased rates of COPD exacerbations, asthma exacerbations, increased heart attacks, increased strokes, as well as, PM 2.5 particle matter causes cancer as well. So climate change is bad and we need to deal with it. And this is a really good way for the city to take action on that. Thankfully, we haven't burned down like Kelowna just did or Lytton, BC did a couple years ago. In Hawaii, people were burned alive in their cars or jumped into a raging ocean this month because a wildfire ran through it. Right now, 7 out of 10 Canadians who live in the Northwest Territories are evacuated. So I know not everybody's open to hearing this, but climate change is coming far faster and stronger than we ever thought it would. And it's getting far, far worse than we ever thought it would. And we have to take real action and we have to start taking it now. This is adding protected bike lanes to Billings Bridge. It is a small action in the scope of those things, but it is going to have a positive impact in our community. And it'll create more momentum for bold action that is still needed going forward. Thank you.
Right on time, Rob. Thank you very much for your delegation today. I appreciate that. Seeing no questions, we'll move to our next delegation. We got Mike Little. We'll check to see if Mike comes back online later on. We'll move to the next delegation. We got Dan Rubenstein. Dan, we'll just wait to jump on.
Hi there. I think you can hear me. I'm not sure if my video is cooperating, but I'm happy to start without being seen, if that's okay.
Absolutely, Dan. 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity, Chair and councillors. I will keep my remarks brief, and many of the things that I'm planning to say echo what a lot of my fellow delegates have said today. I live in Alta Vista. I've been a resident of this neighborhood for 15 years, and I've been a year-round bike commuter for 20 years. I work at Carleton University, so I'm often crossing the Billings Bridge on my bike twice a day. And if I'm heading out in the evenings or running errands, I'm often on the bridge 3, 4, 5 times a day. I'm an very experienced bike commuter, and even I don't feel safe on that bridge. It takes kind of all of the knowledge and experience that I have to be able to do that and to do it comfortably and with confidence. One of my daughters is now a Carleton University student, and as much as I would like to encourage her to bike to campus, I don't feel right doing so because of the dangers on that bridge. So adding bike lanes to that bridge, I think, is hugely important. It's a timely move. The opportunity is there, and I can't see why the city would not do it. I was going to speak about climate change and the climate emergency, the fires across Canada, the intense storms here in Ottawa, but others have spoken to that already. So from a bigger picture perspective, anything we can do to encourage active, sustainable transportation is hugely important. I'm thinking about the new residential towers being built at Bank and Riverside, and the hundreds of residents who are going to be moving into that exact area. Many of whom, from what I have heard and what I understand, won't necessarily be drivers. There's been variances to reduce the number of parking spaces, hopefully be some younger people, and people will be using public transit and biking. So anything we can do to make their lives easier when there's hundreds of people at that intersection is a big step. I've had the opportunity this past summer to do some traveling, and I've spent time in Toronto, in Montreal, in New York City. These are all cities that have done a lot to improve cycling infrastructure over the past 5, 10, 15 years. And I think it's fair to say that they're reaping the benefits of the investment. It's short-term pain for long-term gain. It's better from an environmental perspective, quality of life for locals as they get around. There's also advantages for businesses, for tourism. So the economic development piece is there as well. It'd be nice to see Ottawa continue moving in that direction. And then lastly here, I'll wrap up quickly. Just yesterday, one of my neighbors was in a bike accident on Bank Street. He was heading south, heading home, and he had to come to a really abrupt stop at Glen when a car cut him off to turn right. He was hurt. He fell onto the street. He avoided the car. The paramedics were there. And although Bank and Glen is a couple blocks north of the area in question and wouldn't necessarily be directly impacted by the addition of bike lanes on the bridge, anything we can do to add cycling infrastructure makes drivers and other people more aware that there are cyclists out there, that there are cyclists moving around. And that awareness is a critical part of cycling safety. When you see bike lanes, when you see green paint, when you see signs, you know that there's going to be cyclists around. And maybe this woman wouldn't have pulled in front of the cyclist, cut him off, led to an accident, which it hurt him, could have been bad. He's just a father trying to get home to his kids. And anything we can do to make things safer for people like that is hugely important. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Dan, for your delegation today. I don't see any questions. So we'll go back. It appears Mike Little has now joined us. Mike, we'll wait till you come online. There must be some technical issues, so we're going to move along. Our next delegation is Joan Sweeney, and we're checking online, and I don't see Joan. So we're going to move along to the next delegation. Anne, I don't think we see Anne online either. So we're going to go to Murray Weeks. We'll get you on deck right now, Murray. Hi, Murray. You have 5 minutes. We can hear you clearly and we can see you. So the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks so much. Just overall, I'll be real brief because I have something at 11. So I'm going to just echo all the support for the bike lanes. I bike everywhere with my whole family. I've never owned my own car, bike commuted for 27 years or so, 28 years. There's lots of dangerous spots in the city, and this is one of them. And this is going to be a huge improvement. We will go to, I live in Old Ottawa South, and we'll go to Billingsbridge Mall and the RA Center and places like that. And every time we do it, I mean, we'll take the, over the bridge, we take the sidewalk and walk the bikes. It doesn't feel optimal, but I'm not going to bring kids, and really, I shouldn't be on that road either. So no one should be there. This is a big improvement. I'm just going to say one thing. My understanding of it is what's being proposed for the separation of the lanes is flexible bollards, flex posts. Someone can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but my comment is if we compare to two other bridges, there's the George McElwraith, which is the Smythe Bridge, Main to Smythe Road, where they put the flexible posts. It was an improvement over the painted lines, but I've noticed a lot of the flex posts have been hit by cars. And so that, it's not ideal in terms of separation. And if I look at the Bank Street Bridge, that to me is the example to follow. And I don't see, if it's not been proposed here, why hasn't it been proposed? Because I don't see it taking up any extra room. So if someone could address that, and I'll leave my other comments. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Menard does have a question for you.
I'll just answer his question. Is okay, Chair, just about the space on the bridge. So right now, staff haven't gone through the detailed design. Right now, it's proposed as just paint on the bridge in terms of adding bike lanes. But they're going to be looking into what separation might be possible, whether that be a raised curb, some of the flex stakes, or otherwise, in addition to the safe intersections that are being proposed at either side. So there's lots more work to come on that. And of course, we had challenges on the Bank Street Canal Bridge when that was constructed in terms of space, but we worked that out and had a great end design there that works for everybody. So my hope is the same with this one too. Thanks.
Okay, I'll just say very quickly that if it's just painted lines, just my vote would be, in reality, I think I would definitely, with a group like my family, I would still be taking the sidewalk. Maybe the flex post, we do go over Smythe Bridge sometimes, still feels a little sketchy, but that would be bare minimum, and the Bank Street Bridge would be what I think is reasonable. But thanks so much for all of this work, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Murray, and Councillor Carr and Councillor Menard are both listening, and thank you for your comments today. We'll move on to our next delegation is Henry Chung. Do we have Henry online with us today?
Hello?
Hi, Henry. We can hear you loud and clear. We can't see you, but that's not a problem.
I don't have a webcam.
You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
All right. So I'll start off by saying I was a resident of the Alta Vista neighborhood up until 3 weeks ago when I moved. Used to bike downtown all the time in the evening to go meet up at the Level 1 game pub. In the summer, I could take the Rideau River Pathway and go up to like Herdman Bridge, and it's a nice bike ride, but it adds another like 20 or 30 minutes to my commute there. So if I wanted to get there faster, I'd have to go over Billings Bridge. And for me, I didn't really have the option of taking the sidewalk because I had a big old e-bike. It had wide handlebars. It was super heavy. So if I ran into someone who was in a wheelchair or something, I really was just going to be completely in the way. So some might say I'm kind of dumb for doing this, but I would bike on the bridge every single time. And it was always like the most terrifying part of getting there. But I also, especially in the winter, like I would continue to do this in the winter. The Rideau River path isn't open in the winter because it's a cross-country ski path. And so to cross the river, the only real option is Billings Bridge. And once I crossed there, like I could take Riverdale up to Maine and take those bike paths, but it was still like the only way, realistically, the only way to cross the river from Alta Vista. So I'm very supportive of adding bike lanes to the bridge. I do have to repeat the statement that I think paint is not really enough. It was never, paint will reinforce drivers who do obey the law to, move off to the side and give me enough space. But it was never law-abiding drivers that I had an issue with. It was, drivers who were angry that they felt they were slower behind a cyclist and would try to squeeze past me in an unsafe manner, that really put me in the most danger. So this is a good start for the bridge, but I would love to see, again, physical separation, like concrete barriers, raised curbs, anything like that. As far as the extension, like the bus lane and bike lane on Bank Street, I think it's a fantastic idea. Again, because of all the cars parked on Bank and then traffic on the other lane, I generally made an effort to avoid biking on Bank Street. If I had to get around a parked car, that means I have to merge into moving traffic. And Ottawa drivers are not well conditioned on how to interact with cyclists because there's not many cyclists here, which means that Ottawa drivers aren't really trained to interact with cyclists, and it's a bad cycle. So if the bike lane were there, it's something that I could take on my way to downtown. And I understand the concerns for business owners that losing that parking will impact their business. And I understand the fear of, losing income, especially in this time. But one thing I want to bring up is I almost always would stop somewhere on my bike ride to like grab a drink, grab a snack, have a bit of a rest. And if it was an option for me, I would love to take a stop in Old Ottawa South. There's like haute couture, there's a bunch of cafes, there's bakeries. Basically, there's something for every type of mood. But because it's unsafe, it's frankly unsafe for me to bike up there. It's somewhere I avoid. And so every time I've basically given my business to, the Happy Goat on Main Street because it's open and it's very on the way for me. And as far as like the concern that customers are driving in, I ask you to consider I ask you to consider cyclists as potential customers as well. And if you think about density in that way, like how many bikes can fit in one car parking spot? Like I can think of at least 4. You could probably fit up to 8 depending on how the bike racks are positioned. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Henry, for your delegation today. We're all listening. Seeing no questions, we notice the next delegation is not in attendance. So we're going to go to the final delegation today. So good job, everyone. You understood the assignment. We stuck to the discussion on the table today. Our final delegation is William Van Geist. Hi, William. You're no stranger to this place. Oh, I think you're some kind of muting thing going on here.
Any better now?
Yeah, it's very hard to hear you.
If it's okay by you, I'll just change my settings.
There you go. That's better. We can hear you better now.
Okay, great. Let me just call up my delegation here. Okay, thanks very much for your patience. It's been quite a lineup of delegations. I'm addressing you on behalf of Bike Ottawa, of which I'm the chair of the advocacy working group. We're pleased to see the city's attention to this stretch of Bank Street. As you well know, Bank Street is an important corridor as it cuts a long north-south line through our city, and it's lined with destinations in many places. We also know there's development happening in this area, and we'll need to adjust accordingly to accommodate that development, including making our transportation systems more efficient. Also, the portion in question includes one of the 34 high-volume intersections identified by the city in 2020 as of being particular risk to people biking, and that, of course, is the Bank and Riverside intersection that you know. And in particular, this intersection, Bank and Riverside, has a bad history of collisions, including the death of a person biking in 2013. So It's clear that improvements to this stretch and the larger Bank Street renewal south of this area are very worthwhile. My main message today is that this project heads in the right direction, even if it doesn't go far enough. The direction in question, of course, is improving safety, first of all, and secondly, improving efficiency in travel. I'd like to address three items today. First of all, the intersection of Bank and Riverside that I mentioned. Secondly, Billings Bridge. And third, the biking facilities everywhere else. Beginning with Billings Bridge, currently, as you know, there are 4 lanes for cars as well as sidewalks, and that's it, nothing for people biking. I personally avoid biking through here whenever I can, but this summer I've had to bike through regularly, and I can tell you it is uncomfortable, to say the least. Your choice is between riding on the road with a steel barrier on your right and impatient drivers behind you and on your left, or riding on the narrow sidewalk and endangering people there. The plan before you proposes reducing the number of car lanes by 1 and adding, that's 1 total, and adding painted bike lanes on both sides. Again, this is a step in the right direction. Reducing car lanes will make this portion of Bank safer for everyone, including car drivers. But painted bike lanes ultimately don't offer people biking protection against the 2-ton vehicles that surround them. I urge you to require that physical protection be included here, as the plan contemplates but doesn't commit to. This could be as simple as pin curbs, as on Laurier West downtown. Moving on to the intersection of Bank and Riverside, this too is a step in the right direction. A separate signal phase for southbound drivers turning right on Riverside should reduce the risk of right hooks. That was identified as a particular dangerous aspect. Tightening the turn radii should encourage drivers to take the corners at slower speeds, and shortening crosswalks will make the intersection safer for people walking and rolling. Given the proximity of this intersection to the Billings Bridge Shopping Center, it's critical that every effort be made to make it safer for people walking, rolling, and biking. As for the biking facilities elsewhere, these also head in the right direction, but don't go far enough. Obviously, making a lane transit priority is a great idea, but making this lane serve double duty for people biking doesn't make sense. There's no comfort in knowing a bus could bear down on you at any time, and no one wants to be holding up a busload of people while biking up the hill northbound. Removing car parking is again a good idea, and if actual bike facilities were added, should even result in a net improvement for the businesses along this stretch. In closing, I want to emphasize the importance of this project for connectivity. It crosses this area, crosses the Rideau River Pathway, as you know. It's right next to the Billings Bridge Shopping Center. It's just north of the upcoming Bank Street Renewal Project. It's just south of Lansdowne Park. So not proceeding with this project will ensure heavier car traffic in this area and isolate anyone not in a car. Thanks very much for your attention.
Great. Thank you very much for your delegation today. Seeing no questions, sorry, Councillor Troster.
Thanks. Hi, William. Thanks. It's nice to see you again. I'm just curious. So you mentioned pin curbs. I know it's a very narrow space, and I agree with you that paint is not infrastructure, and flex posts can only do so much. Do you have, having looked at the plans, do you have a very specific suggestion that you would like to see in terms of separation? Is pin curbs the ideal in your eyes, or is there another way that we can protect cyclists?
I mean, of course, yeah, thanks very much for the question, Councillor. Of course, the more the protection, the better. I always love to see planter boxes because there's an aesthetic element there. That's obviously not going to happen in the proposed configuration. I mentioned pin curbs because they're the slimmest, to my knowledge, that offer actual physical protection. I did notice that there are no lane widths in the proposal, and that's pretty important information. I imagine that right turn southbound right turn car lane could be quite slim, given that it's essentially a storage lane. That being the case, yeah, I do wonder whether there will be space for something like pin curbs, and again, I urge in the strongest possible terms some actual protection along those lines.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much again, William. That concludes our delegations portion of the meeting. So good job, everybody. And now we'll move to questions to staff. If you could use your raised hand feature. Councillor Gower.
Thanks, Chair. I wanted to ask staff, what actually triggers this report to come to committee and council for approval? Because it seems to be very well aligned with policy. Is it a budget issue? Is it something within our policy that requires approval? I'm just curious about procedure for this.
You're right that it has a high degree of policy alignment. Because of the traffic implications and parking implications, we felt it was appropriate to bring it forward and to be able to give residents the opportunity to speak as well.
Is it an absolute requirement that these come to committee? I'm just, because we're going to have a lot of these, and I appreciate there's interest from many different perspectives. But if we are going to be, or if we have policy, or we're going to be establishing new policy, the transportation master plan, similar to how in our planning, we're trying to update our zoning so that we don't always have long debates about things that are aligned to council approved policy. I'm just curious about what we can expect in the future on projects like these.
Councillor, if I can step in. The reason why you're asking about why we brought this report here today when it's we've already been given directions to work. Is that okay? I wanted to bring it to council's attention that there is traffic impact, just as we did with Elgin, because it is, it is an impact that is of interest to many. So that's why we felt we need to share this information so that there are no surprises when the project is implemented.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. So I've in a previous life, I've driven up and down this stretch of Bank Street probably about 2,000 to 2,500 times over 7 years. So I have a lot of familiarity with this stretch of Bank Street and how precarious it really is for cyclists as well as vehicles. So some of my concerns, so I'll start with the northbound bus lane, the hot take, if you will. Start with the northbound bus lane is, I don't think it'll actually make a difference for public transit because your bus stops northbound at Riverdale, Cameron, Belmont are before the traffic light, and the traffic light cycles change so quickly on Bank Street that every time you're at a bus stop, the light changes anyway, so you're held up anyway. I get the spirit of the bus lane to keep the bus moving and keep it from changing lanes, but in that crowded section of Bank Street, typically it does. Typically traffic is pretty good to you. So with that northbound bus lane, with the reduction to one lane going southbound, like I'm thinking of the southbound buses now. Because in the afternoon rush, at least pre-pandemic, I'm not sure about now, but at least pre-pandemic, traffic would normally be backed up going southbound till like Cameron to cross the Billings Bridge. Do you foresee any greater impact in terms of that, in terms of the reduction to one lane going through the intersection at Riverdale?
We do expect there to be some queue leading back from Riverdale northward in the southbound direction due to the reduction to one lane. But I believe it goes about as far as Cameron, so it's not anything more significant than what we would expect today.
Okay, and then going further, so there is a bus stop on Bank Street south of Riverdale, going southbound. In the drawing that was provided to us, that was attached to the report, I should say, there's a dash line. That means I'm guessing the bus pulls into the bike lane to service that stop, that is 6 and the 5. I'm picturing a scenario just like on Woodruff and just like in whatever other streets with a painted bike lane where you have a bus stopped in the bike lane. You have cars kind of trying to weave around, and then you also have cyclists trying to get around the bus. So that, I think, creates an even more dangerous situation than what you're trying to alleviate. Has there been any consideration of some sort of bulb out or with ramps for bikes up and down in that location?
Yeah, normally we would try to do something like that, like a bulb out where the cycle track goes behind the bus stop or a landing zone for the bus stop. But in some situations, we just don't have enough space to do that. And this is one of those where we don't have sufficient space. So the next best option is to have buses stop in the bike lane and bikes would be expected to wait behind the bus and not proceed around the bus.
That's fair. Like expectation is not the same as practice, right? You can we can tell cars are supposed to wait behind buses when they're stopped in bike lanes, but they don't. And that creates a lot of situations where you have really unsafe lane changes on roads like Woodruff, and I can foresee the same thing on Riverdale, including coming into oncoming traffic for in that one lane section. So I would that is something I would appreciate if possible to consider adding a bulb out there with the ramp for cyclists, because I think that will actually worsen the situation in the current design. Not a qualified engineer, by the way. I will hold my questions for later, the rest of my questions for later, and let my colleagues go first.
Great, thank you. Councillor Troster.
So I think I know the answer to this, because we do have this issue of buses going into the bike lane, which I am very worried about. But what's stopping the city from putting in more robust protection for cyclists? Because, you know, law-abiding drivers who are cautious with cyclists, they will follow the painted line, but other people won't. And the data out there shows that painted lines offer almost no protection to cyclists. So is there an opportunity anywhere in that stretch to put in pin curbs or something more robust?
So the width of Billings Bridge is very limited. We're not changing the edge of the bridge. And the 3 resulting traffic lanes across the bridge all have to be of a certain width because they accommodate both trucks and buses. And the bike lanes also have to be of a certain width in order to accommodate winter maintenance. All that to say is we're still looking at options to provide some type of physical separation between the vehicle lanes and the bike lanes. We don't know yet what that might look like, but we're looking at all kinds of different options, including pin curbs and different types of temporary materials as well. But we don't know what that might be yet. So that's something that during the detailed design, we'll get into more detail.
Great. And one more question. Having recently come back from Montreal to see a lot of their transformation to cycling infrastructure in the plateau, they're using a lot of planters and greenery, as you know, attached to pin curbs. Is that something you'd be willing to explore? I mean, that area is desperate for some green. It's pretty much a concrete jungle.
Again, we might be limited in terms of space for something like that, but it's certainly something we can look into where appropriate.
That's great. Anyway, I appreciate it. And again, I just want to reiterate, you know, better separation, some sort of barrier. We all know it's better. So as much as possible, you know, we ran into similar issues, even just with the temporary bike lane on Wellington. There were areas where we had to allow a merge for tour buses, for example, or for a city bus, but whatever we can do to help keep people safe. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Menard.
Thanks so much, Chair. Just want to thank yourself, the Vice Chair, as well as the Mayor, who've had conversations on this as well, and the delegations who came out, and then who are, you know, excellent delegations, succinct and clear, and then to staff who have been working for a number of years on the changes here. I know, you know, this area is a challenge. I guess to Councillor Gower's inquiry as well. There's a project from the bridge, I think you know, all the way to Walkley, Ledbury, and that's renewing the underground infrastructure there, which is very old and obviously needed to be changed over. So it didn't make sense to have that project kind of stop at a dangerous area where we're seeing collisions occur. It made sense to kind of incorporate that in that project, which is starting. Advanced works have already started there, and will continue over the next couple of years. There's also 3 towers in that area at Bank and Riverside that are going in, 3 large towers, which council had approved unanimously. With some changes, but there'll be a lot of, you know, density added in this area too. So it made sense to make it safe at the same time, as that's going to happen between the 2 riversides in that loop. It is a dangerous intersection, Chair. From 2015 to 2019, we saw 300 collisions at the Bank and Riversides. So it's really high up there on our list. 103 of those were at the intersection of the bridge and Riverside Drive, right where the area we're talking about. So certainly needed, not just for people that are walking and biking, but people that are also driving, getting in accidents. It costs a lot for us to have resources to go out there every time there's a collision too. So I did want to just mention with staff, because I think we've had this discussion, that the actual traffic impact on Bank Street slowdowns is pretty negligible because of that new right turn lane going on Riverside as you're heading southbound. That's a good innovation with a protected intersection there, as well as the light signal timing that can be adjusted. So the Bank Street changes are not going to be a big impact. The Riverside Drive ones, it's fairly minimal, only at peak periods, and so looking pretty positive overall in terms of actual changes there. I did want to mention, because I mentioned it in a few delegations, I'm going to work with staff and businesses on the hours proposed for the bus lane priority. They've already worked on that. They've already changed it to 3 instead of 4. I know businesses appreciate that. I recognize this opens up potential new segments of businesses as well, given the shared roadway space in this area. So I'm going to talk to them, but not right now. But I think before council, I'll have those discussions and see if something makes sense or not. I know staff can be engaged with us on that too. And then just the last point I'll make is that physical separation is important. I see the benefits at Riverdale and at Riverside. That innovation is really appreciated and helpful. And I think you also, the teams here know, ideally we get that physical separation. The same conversation happened on Bank Street, a bridge over the canal, where we said, okay, can we modify the bike lanes a little bit? Can we modify the roadway a little bit so that we get, even those inches matter when it comes to that separation. So I'm sure we can find a solution here too. So just huge thanks all around to the businesses here, the residents here, staff, and the team that's helped with this project. So appreciate it, Chair. And I also want to mention, Councillor Carr as well. I know Councillor Carr wasn't in last term, but our discussions up until this point too have been very fruitful, and similar kind of feedback on the Alta Vista Capital Ward side. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for those comments. I'm going to go to Vice Chair Kitts, then Councillor DeRoche, because he'd be first round. Then I'll go back to you, Councillor Lowe.
Thank you very much. I note that the bridge is up for renewal in a 7 to 10 year time frame. Appreciating that that's much too long to wait for the community. I just want to make sure that we're not looking at a situation where we're investing in an asset that potentially will need to be completely reconstructed in the next decade.
Yeah, the changes we're making to the actual bridge as part of this project are very minimal. It's really just line paint. The physical changes we're making as part of this project are to the intersections of Riverside and Riverdale, but they're off the bridge. So it doesn't preclude any other future changes being made as part of a future bridge renewal.
Great, thank you for that. One of the delegations brought up sort of creative solutions to perhaps making up for the loss of parking in different ways. Just wondering if that's something that's been explored at all, or something that you could take back.
Yeah, that's certainly something that we intend to look into if this project moves forward, is possible ways that we can adjust some of the parking restrictions on some of the side streets or other things that we might do to try to accommodate the parking needs or loading needs in the area.
Is there any way we could get maybe some high level thoughts before this comes to council? I know that's a quick turnaround, but
I think so, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then lastly, just I was looking for a comment perhaps from Mr. Scrimger based on Councillor Lowe's lived experience. We're very lucky to have a former OC Transpo driver. But a comment on why the transit priority is needed, again, based on comments that perhaps it's not going to solve the issue through that corridor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We measure the time that all buses take to move on all routes across the city, and the travel time for customers who are on northbound buses on Bank Street is especially long, between 2 in the afternoon and 7 p.m. Monday to Friday. And it's, it can be up to 3 minutes longer than it is at other times of the week. And so if we can reduce the need for buses to move in and out of the curb lane, if we can reduce the conflict or the other activity that's in front of that bus, then we can reduce travel times for the customers on those buses.
Okay. And will you be looking at making changes to the signalization, like the timing of the signals? Because I know that the signal cycles are quite short in that corridor as well.
Yes, absolutely. That's ongoing work that we're always engaged in with Phil Landry's team.
Okay.
Traffic.
So my questions, thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Councillor DeRoche.
I don't have any questions, Chair. I was just going to speak to the motion when it's, or the recommendation when the time comes. So you can continue with questions if you want.
We'll go to Councillor Lowe. And so, sorry, Steve, did you just want to do some kind of wrap up or something? Or?
Yeah, I was just going to speak to it, Chair. It sounds like if you want, we can do a combination, or I'm in your hands.
Yeah, please go ahead. We'll treat questions and wrap up together. Just to
Thanks, Chair, and it won't take long. And I for one am glad that the project is before us. I think a big part of the mandate of this committee, Transportation Committee, is to look at things as a network. And this bridge, is particularly our bridges throughout the city, are really those pinch points for the transportation network. So I'm pleased it came forward. And I think it also gives an opportunity for residents to come forward, especially when we are into conflicts on modes, to be heard. And I'm very thankful for some of the delegates for all the delegates for that matter, but for some of them that came forward with concerns with the impact on their businesses, and they should be heard, and they should be treated with respect, which this committee has done today, and not be accused of all being opposed to this or that. So this is our role as a city, that we get into some of the finer details in terms of impact, and glad they had that opportunity today. I think we are moving towards making a more sustainable city. We're making massive investments in the LRT infrastructure in the north-south. I don't think there's any appetite to make investments in the Alta Vista Parkway, and that's not something that I'll be championing. But in terms of, if we move away from that, then I think it's going to put greater pressure on the road network, and particularly the bridges that are pinch points. And we heard from staff that there will be trade-offs, and that the traffic will be diverted to other parts of the city, and those people will someday wake up to these impacts. And again, I think we have to be transparent in the decision that we have. So again, I'm going to be dissenting on this today. Again, I think I appreciate staff. We'll say that there's a heritage aspect to this bridge, but we already do have a cantilever structure to it. I think we could have provided for some greater and creative accommodation through cantilevers. And I think when you travel to cities around the world, you do see that kind of creativity that goes into it. So again, I won't be supporting it today. I appreciate we're trying to balance a wide range of transportation needs, but this is not the choice that I would have picked, and won't be supporting it today. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Your dissent has been noted. We're still on first round, so I'll go to Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to follow up a little bit on what I heard from my colleague, Councillor Kitts. So I am supportive of the recommendations, both the bridge aspect and the bus only lane. But I am also cognizant of the concern that businesses raised about the loss of parking, even though one delegate made it clear that the amount of parking spots reduced would represent, a very small number, 3% of parking spaces available. But I do, just to follow up on what Councillor Kitt said, which was in recognition of what we heard from a delegate, I did take a quick peek. Some of those streets that lead on to Bank, I think it's Glen, Convent, or streets like that, they're rather wide one-way streets. And so I just want to, staff already responded to Councillor Kitts that they will possibly coming back with some high-level suggestions of parking modifications that can be made on those residential streets. But in my non-expert opinion, better land use could be acquired through the exploration of diagonal parking on those streets. I'm not sure to what level it's been explored, but even if you're looking at only the first 40 meters east and west of Bank, if you go from straight on parking to diagonal, you're putting a lot more parking spaces in there, which could set a precedent for allowing us to take more parking away from main thoroughfares to accommodate more projects like this. So if that is something that could be discussed high level as we consider this. Just to echo my colleague, Councillor Kitts, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. I don't know if staff have anything to add to that, but they've listened to you, Councillor Devine. So if you're satisfied with that, we'll move on to back to Councillor Lowe and second round.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for the second round. So I kind of want to move over to the Bank and Riverside intersection, and I noticed that in the drawing, the northbound traffic for Bank Street narrows down to 2 lanes just before the intersection for the westbound leg of Riverside. I mean, my doom and gloom, I kind of foresee some gridlock there, like actual gridlock where northbound traffic blocks eastbound traffic on Riverside, and then eastbound traffic tries to go, then blocks southbound traffic. Have there been any considerations? I know there have been discussions in the past and considerations, and even it's been raised by the local councillor to combine the 2 legs of Riverside into one large Bank and Riverside intersection. Are you able to walk? Now with all the policies, we can make it a protected intersection, and with all the space that's there compared to the riverbank, I should say. Can you walk me? Do you mind walking me through some of the analysis that's been done there and why that can or cannot be done?
Yes, Councillor. So it started back in 2012. There was a community design plan done for the area, and the issue of combining the 2 legs of the Bank Riverside intersections was investigated, but the volumes were quite high. So the conclusion of that CDP was just to maintain what is there. So council approved that, and we moved on with other decisions around that. Then in 2019 and again in 2021, we did another review again to revisit, just to see if conditions have changed and what we can do there. So my team did look at develop some concepts and combining the 2 intersections, because they are very heavily used intersections. Then combining 2 to 1, of course, you're going to have a much larger, much more massive intersection, which then interferes with all of our other policies. It makes it difficult for pedestrians and cyclists to cross. And it's just really huge for that area. There are developments that have been approved recently, some condos, some big buildings, hotels that are going in. So then if we were to proceed with that, all of those would have to be put on hold, and we would have to buy property to deal with that as well. And even for traffic, the vehicles, they would experience, instead of 60-second cycle, or the delay time that they would have to wait at the intersections, it would double or triple that to about 190 seconds. So it would interfere with the physical layout of the area. It would interfere with the mode use. And the last thing that we looked at was cost, because it's not just around this intersection. It really affects, the lead up to the intersection. So the reconstruction would take you all the way from Data Center Road to Neil Way. And there's just no money for this work. It's not in anybody's work program. It's not related to growth, so you wouldn't get development charges for this. So it'll be on the tax base. And we're talking about tens of millions, not just a few million. So given that we've revisited a few times and that decisions have been made in the past based on the current configuration, what we can do now through projects like the Bank Street renewal and this work that my team is presenting today, we can improve the conditions for active transportation and for transit, which that all aligns with safety and the sustainable policies that we have in our transportation master plan, the OP.
Thank you. And to tag onto that a little bit, the bridge portion of this, the painted lines are, I don't think will really do too much in terms of safety. It's, have we considered, well, I could have read the whole thing, but I kind of skimmed it. But have we considered things like clip-on structures for the bridge? I know they're not actually clip-ons, but they're kind of like separate bridges attached to the original bridge. But have we considered things like that would kind of widen the sidewalk and then, turn the existing sidewalk into a bike lane and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, my understanding is that that had been looked at in the past and was found not to be feasible at that time. But it is something that can be looked at again at such time that that bridge does go through its renewal process, which I think we said was sometime between 6 and 10 years.
Okay, so in many ways, this is an interim solution till then.
I wouldn't necessarily say interim, but it's a way to improve safety for people walking and cycling as part of another project for a very low cost.
Okay, understood. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Seeing no further questions, I want to thank Cal and Deborah. You put a tremendous amount of work in this. I only had one question just so people are aware. How soon? I know there's still a lot of minutiae and detail to get into. When can we expect a start date and a completion date on a project like this?
I can't quote you specific dates, but we will be working on the detailed design between council, if approved, and over the winter with the intent that it would go to construction in 2024.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, terrific work. I do appreciate it. We've noted Councillor DesRoches' dissent on this. Is this item carried? Great. Thank you very much.
Can I dissent on item 2?
Item two, so note dissent on item 2 for Councillor Lowe. So we have no in-camera motions or in-camera items, sorry. Therefore, okay, no, on, wow, that was going way quicker than I thought. Okay, notices motion for subsequent meetings. We do not have one. We do have an inquiry by Councillor Troster.
Thank you, Chair. I almost forgot about that. So there are 103 individual public infrastructure projects in Somerset Ward this summer, which has created some significant challenges in terms of pedestrian accessibility. In one case, there was sidewalks were actually closed on both sides of the building, and there was a resident living in an apartment who uses a wheelchair who could not access the area outside their apartment at all. So what are the city's current standards for pedestrian accessibility during sidewalk construction? Do complaints to 311 about construction accessibility concerns automatically translate into a site assessment? How many site inspections were carried out through the standards office last year, and how many included volunteer residents? How many changes were made to city construction sites as a result of standards inspections in the last year, specifically pertaining to pedestrian accessibility? What follow-up concerns to ensure the changes, what follow-up occurs to ensure the changes have been made? In what circumstances does the city close both sidewalks for construction at the same time? And how are mobility challenges and accessibility needs determined and protected during sidewalk repair construction? And I also did want to give a shout out to staff though, because in this particular situation where the sidewalk was closed on both sides, a member of staff did come meet with the resident and repeatedly assess the site and ensure that they were able to have access, but it was still quite problematic and quite unexpected for that resident. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor. We have no other business. So just before adjournment, I want to thank our committee coordinator and staff for helping us out so much and making us look good today. And adjournment, next meeting is going to take place September 28th, 2003. Have a great day.